tiny black twins. Beg Hell's Angel for help. What happened next? Broke him. A storm is raging. Inside a broken-down motorcycle garage, a scarred ex-Hell's Angel drinks alone, until two tiny black twins show up at his door, barefoot and shaking. They say their mama told them to find the angel with wings on his back. He wants to send them away, but something in their eyes stops him cold. By morning, he realizes who their mother is, the nurse who once saved his life when no one else would. Now she's missing, hunted by the same kind of men he used to ride with. The biker swore he was done saving souls, but as those little hands cling to him and danger closes in, can a man once called a demon become someone's angel before it's too late? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thunder crashed against the metal roof of Brick's garage, each boom echoing through the cluttered space like angry drums. The ex-biker sat hunched on his worn leather stool, a half-empty bottle of whiskey keeping him company among the scattered tools and grease-stained rags. His weathered hands, marked with decades of mechanical work and hard living, wrapped around the bottle's neck. Lightning flashed, illuminating the Hell's Angel's tattoo that stretched across his broad shoulders. Faded wings that had once symbolized freedom, but now felt more like the weight of his sins. In these moments, when the night was as dark as his thoughts, memories of his brother Jimmy's bloody end in a gang fight haunted him most. The wind howled through the gaps in the old building's walls, carrying the smell of rain and wet Georgia clay. Brick took another burning sip, trying to wash away the bitter taste of his past. 5 years in prison hadn't cleaned his slate, and the lonely nights in his run-down garage turned home on the outskirts of town reminded him that some stains never wash out. A soft knock, almost lost in the storm's fury, made him freeze mid-sip. It came again, more urgent this time. "We ain't open," he growled, loud enough to carry through the door. But the knocking persisted, desperate little taps that seemed too gentle for this harsh night. Cursing under his breath, Brick stood up, his joints creaking in protest. The concrete floor was cold beneath his boots as he crossed the garage. When he yanked open the heavy door, the sight before him stopped him cold. Two tiny figures stood huddled together in the downpour, black children, no more than 6 years old, identical down to their soaked braids and trembling chins. Their feet were bare and muddy, their clothes clinging to their small frames like second skins. "Please, sir," the girl said, her voice barely a whisper above the rain. "Mama said to find the angel with wings on his back." Brick's hand tightened on the doorframe. The wings they meant were the ones tattooed across his shoulders. Remnant of his Hell's Angels days. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. There was nothing angelic about his past. The boy, standing slightly in front of his sister in a protective stance, watched Brick with eyes too old for his young face. "We need help," he said simply, his quiet dignity striking against the wild night. Everything in Brick screamed to shut the door. He wasn't anybody's savior. Hell, he could barely save himself most days. But something in those innocent faces, something in the trust and desperation mingled in their eyes, made his calloused heart stutter. "Christ," he muttered, stepping aside. "Get in here before you both catch your death." The children hurried inside, leaving small puddles in their wake. Brick grabbed a couple of clean shop towels, the best he had to offer, and wrapped them around the shivering twins. "I'm Ariel," the girl offered with a small smile that seemed to brighten the dim garage. "This is my brother Amari." Amari hadn't taken his eyes off Brick, studying him with an intensity that made the big man uncomfortable. The boy's gaze seemed to see right through him, past the tattoos and scars to something deeper. "Travis Malone," Brick said gruffly, then added, "Most folks call me Brick." He guided them to his small office area, clearing off his ancient couch. "Sit. Tell me what's going on." The twins perched on the edge of the couch, still huddled together. Ariel spoke first, her voice trembling but clear. "Mama's gone. A bad man came to our house 2 days ago. He tried to hurt her." "She told us to run," Amari continued, his small hand finding his sister's. "Said to find the angel with wings on his back. Said he'd help us." Brick ran a hand over his face, feeling the rough scratch of his beard. Their mother must have seen him around town, maybe at the diner where he sometimes got coffee. But why she'd send her children to him, of all people, was beyond his understanding. "Listen," he said, trying to keep his voice gentle despite its natural gravel. "First thing tomorrow, I'm calling the police. They'll know what to do, how to find your mama." Ariel's face crumpled slightly. "But Mama said not to talk to police, said they wouldn't understand." Thunder rolled overhead, and both children flinched. Brick found himself moving closer, his hulking frame casting a protective shadow over them. "You two eaten anything today?" They shook their heads in unison. Brick walked to his small refrigerator, pulling out some leftover ham and cheese. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As he made simple sandwiches, he could feel Amari's eyes following his every move. "You're not really an angel, are you?" the boy asked suddenly. Brick let out a harsh laugh. "No, kid. Far from it." "But you're helping us," Ariel said with the simple logic of a child. "That's what angels do." Her words hit him like a physical blow. Here he was, a man who'd done terrible things, who'd been part of so much pain and destruction, and this little girl was looking at him like he was some kind of savior. He brought them the sandwiches and watched as they ate carefully, trying not to drop crumbs on his couch. Their manners spoke of good raising, making their current situation even more troubling. "Where do you live?" he asked, settling into his desk chair. "In the yellow house past Miller's Creek," Amari answered between bites. "But we can't go back there. The bad man might come back." Brick nodded slowly, his mind working through the implications. These kids had walked miles in the rain, barefoot, to find him. Whatever their mother was mixed up in, it had to be serious for her to send them to a stranger, even one with wings on his back. The storm continued its assault outside, but inside the garage, a strange peace had settled. The twins finished their sandwiches, their eyelids growing heavy despite their obvious attempt to stay alert. Brick found an old blanket in his storage closet and draped it over them as they curled up together on the couch. "Try to sleep," he said gruffly. "You're safe here." As he watched them drift off, Ariel's hand clutching her brother's, Brick felt something shift inside him. He'd spent years building walls around himself, trying to forget the man he used to be, trying to escape the weight of his past. But these two children, with their trust and innocence, had somehow slipped through those defenses. He moved quietly through the garage, securing the doors and windows. The bottle of whiskey sat where he'd left it, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to lose himself in its familiar burn. Instead, he settled into his chair, keeping watch over his unexpected guests as the storm raged on. In the soft glow of his desk lamp, Brick studied their peaceful faces and felt the stirring of something he'd thought long dead, a sense of purpose, a flicker of humanity he'd buried beneath years of guilt and regret. Whatever trouble these kids and their mother were in, whatever darkness had sent them to his door on this storm-swept night, he knew he couldn't turn them away. The rain continued to drum against the roof, but now it seemed less lonely, less accusatory. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own decisions. But for now, in this moment, Brick had made his first choice, to be the angel these children believed him to be, even if he didn't believe it himself. The first rays of morning sunlight crept through the garage's grimy windows, painting streaks across the concrete floor. Brick had dozed off in his chair sometime before dawn, his neck stiff from the awkward angle. The storm had passed, leaving behind that fresh, clean smell that follows rain. He glanced at the twins, still curled up together on his worn couch. Ariel's thumb had found its way to her mouth in sleep, making her look even younger than her 6 years. Amari's arm was draped protectively over his sister, even in sleep. Brick's stomach growled, reminding him that kids needed proper food. He shuffled to his small kitchenette, pulling out a cast-iron skillet that had seen better days. The pan had a thick layer of seasoning from years of use, testament to the simple meals he'd cooked for himself. He found half a dozen eggs in his refrigerator and some slightly stale bread. The sizzle of eggs hitting the hot pan roused the twins. They sat up, rubbing sleep from their eyes, their hair mussed from rest. "Something smells good," Amari said cautiously, his nose twitching. "Just eggs," Brick replied gruffly, but he felt a strange warmth at the boy's words. "Come on, get cleaned up. Bathroom's through that door." The twins padded to the bathroom together, emerging a few minutes later with faces washed and looking marginally more alert. They climbed onto the 2 mismatched bar stools at his counter, watching him cook with solemn eyes. "You like your eggs scrambled?" he asked, realizing he should have asked before cooking them. "Yes, sir," they answered in unison, making him wince at the formality. "Just brick is fine," he muttered, sliding the eggs onto 2 chipped plates. He added the toast he'd managed to salvage and set the plates in front of them. The way they attacked the food made his heart clench. These weren't kids who'd just missed dinner. They'd been hungry for days. He quietly made more eggs, pushing them onto their plates when they finished the first serving. "Thank you," Ariel said, her voice small but sincere. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a crumpled photograph. "This is our mama. Her name's Tasha." Brick took the photo, and the world tilted beneath his feet. The woman in the picture was young, maybe 30, with warm brown skin and gentle eyes that seemed to look right through you. She wore purple scrubs and had a stethoscope around her neck. But it wasn't just any nurse. It was her. The same woman who'd found him 3 years ago, sprawled in a hospital parking lot after an overdose that should have killed him. His hands trembled as he remembered her face hovering over his, her voice cutting through the darkness that had been pulling him under. "Stay with me," she'd said, her hand warm in his as she waited for the ambulance. "You still got purpose, even if you don't see it." He'd never known her name, had been too ashamed to look her up after he recovered. But she'd stayed with him that night, praying over him when she thought he couldn't hear, refusing to let him slip away. "Your mama?" he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She's a nurse?" Amari nodded proudly. "At the free clinic. She helps people who can't pay." Of course she did. The realization of who had sent these children to him, this woman who'd seen something in him worth saving, made his chest ache. "We need to find her," he said, more to himself than the twins. "Get dressed, kids. We're going into town." 20 minutes later, they were in his old pickup truck, the twins sharing the passenger seat because he couldn't bear to put them in the truck bed. The town was starting to wake up, shopkeepers unlocking doors, early morning regulars heading to the diner for coffee. The stares started immediately. Brick was used to people looking at him sideways. His size, his tattoos, his reputation all made folks nervous. But now they were looking at the children, their eyes moving from his white face to their brown ones, making assumptions that made his jaw clench. He parked outside May's diner, helping the twins down from the truck. Inside, the breakfast crowd fell silent as they entered. Brick guided the children to a booth, trying to ignore the whispers. "Well, if it ain't Travis Malone," May herself said, approaching their table with coffee pot in hand. She was in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "And who might these little ones be?" Before Brick could answer, Ariel held out the photo. "We're looking for our mama. Have you seen her?" May's expression shifted as she studied the picture. "That's Tasha Gaines, sweet woman, volunteers at the church food pantry." She glanced at the twins, understanding dawning. "You're her babies? We've been worried sick. She hasn't been in for 3 days, not since—" She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Since what?" Brick pressed, leaning forward. May lowered her voice. "Since that nasty business with her ex. He showed up here, causing a scene, threatening her. Police came, but he was gone. Nobody's seen her since her shift at the clinic that night." Brick felt something twist in his gut. The pieces were falling into place. Why Tasha had sent her children to him. Why they couldn't go to the police. "Can you watch them for a minute?" he asked May. "Need to make a phone call." Outside, he leaned against his truck, trying to think. He had contacts, people who could help look for her, but using them meant stepping back into a world he'd tried to leave behind. When he returned, May had given the twins hot chocolate with whipped cream. They had white mustaches and, for the first time, looked like the children they were supposed to be. That evening, back in his garage, Brick made up beds for them in his small office. He'd cleared out the filing cabinets, laid down some blankets, made it as comfortable as he could. It wasn't much, but it was safer than anywhere else right now. "Story?" Ariel asked hopefully as he tucked them in. "I don't know any stories, kid." "Then can we pray?" Her small hand found his large one, and before he could object, she was speaking. "Dear God, thank you for sending us to Mr. Angel. Please help us find Mama, and please help Mr. Angel smile more. Amen." "God sent us to you," she whispered as she drifted off to sleep. Brick couldn't respond. He stood in the doorway, watching them sleep, feeling tears roll down his weathered cheeks for the first time in years. The purpose Tasha had spoken of that night, maybe this was it, wrapped in the trust of 2 small children and the memory of a kind nurse who'd once believed he was worth saving. The morning sun cast long shadows through the garage's grimy windows as Brick made breakfast for the twins. He'd managed to find some cereal in his cupboard that wasn't too stale, and the kids were happily munching away when the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel made him tense. Through the window, he spotted the familiar white and blue patrol car pulling up. Sheriff Darrell Kemp stepped out, his weathered face set in grim lines. Brick recognized that look. It was the same expression Kemp had worn years ago when he'd arrested him. "Stay here," Brick told the twins quietly. "Don't make a sound." He met the sheriff at the door before he could knock. Kemp looked older than Brick remembered, his hair more gray than brown now, deep lines etched around his eyes from too many long nights and hard decisions. "Travis Malone," Kemp said, removing his sunglasses. "Got an interesting call this morning. Someone at May's diner saw you with 2 children who matched the description of Tasha Gaines' missing twins." Brick crossed his arms, filling the doorway with his bulk. "That right? Don't play dumb, Malone. It doesn't suit you." Kemp's eyes tried to peer past him into the garage. "Where are they?" "Safe." The sheriff sighed, hooking his thumbs in his belt loops. "Look, I know you've been keeping your nose clean since getting out. 3 years without so much as a parking ticket. I respect that. But harboring minor children without their guardian's consent, that's kidnapping, plain and simple." "They came to me," Brick said, his voice low and intense. Their mama sent them. Then where is she? Kemp challenged. When Brick didn't answer, he continued. Their stepfather's been asking questions. Luther Gaines, you know him? Brick's jaw tightened. Every ex-con in 3 counties knew Luther Gaines. He'd been muscle for the Devil's Hand motorcycle gang before going legitimate with his own security company. But everyone knew it was just a front for his less legal enterprises. Those kids are terrified of him, Brick said. That tell you anything? Kemp's expression softened slightly. I get what you're trying to do here, Malone. But you're not thinking straight. You've got no legal right to these children. Luther's their legal guardian with Tasha missing. You keep them here, you're looking at serious time. From inside, there was a small clatter, probably one of the twins dropping a spoon. Kemp's head snapped toward the sound. I need to see them, the sheriff said. Make sure they're okay. They're fine. Brick didn't move from the doorway. And they're staying that way. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Kemp spoke again, his voice lower. Luther's got friends in low places, Malone. Mean ones. Word is he's already putting out feelers, calling in favors to find these kids. That's supposed to scare me? It should. Man like that, he'll burn everything down to get what he wants. Kemp put his sunglasses back on. I'm giving you 24 hours to do the right thing. After that, I can't help you. The sheriff turned and walked back to his car. Just before getting in, he called out, Whatever you're planning, Malone, don't. Some angels ain't meant to fly again. Brick watched until the patrol car disappeared around the bend. Then he moved quickly, his prison-honed instincts screaming at him to act fast. He grabbed his old army duffel bag, stuffing it with clothes, first aid supplies, and non-perishable food. The twins watched him with wide eyes as he moved around the garage, gathering what they'd need. Are we in trouble? Amari asked quietly. No, little man, Brick assured him, though his heart was heavy. But we need to find your mama quick, before the bad men do. He thought about what Kemp had said about Luther. The man had connections everywhere. Cops, criminals, people in between. They couldn't stay in one place long. Couldn't trust anyone. As he packed, his eyes fell on his old Harley Davidson, covered in dust in the corner. He hadn't ridden it since getting out of prison. Couldn't bear to feel that freedom again, knowing what it had cost him. But now... Help me with something, he told the twins, rolling out his pickup truck's loading ramp. Together they watched as he pushed the motorcycle up into the truck bed, securing it with straps. Might need it. Might need the speed and maneuverability only 2 wheels could provide. Evening was falling when he finally finished preparations. In the grimy bathroom mirror, Brick stripped off his shirt, studying the tattoo that covered his entire back. Massive angel wings, now faded and scarred from years of hard living. The twins had been right. Their mama had known exactly what she was doing when she sent them to him. Guess I got one more ride left, he muttered to his reflection, touching the wings that had once symbolized freedom, but now felt more like a responsibility. The twins were already drowsy when he loaded them into the pickup's cab. He'd made them a nest of blankets on the bench seat, and they curled up together like puppies, trusting him completely despite everything. Where we going? Ariel asked sleepily. To find your mama, Brick said, starting the engine. Now get some rest. We've got a long road ahead. As they pulled away from the garage, he caught one last glimpse of his old life in the rearview mirror. The building looked small and abandoned in the gathering darkness, just another ghost on a road full of them. But for the first time in years, Brick felt something like purpose stirring in his chest. These children needed him. Their mother needed him. And maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to earn those wings on his back. The truck's headlights cut through the night as they drove away from everything familiar, the twins sleeping peacefully beside him, their small hands clasped together even in sleep. Brick kept his eyes on the road ahead, watching for signs of trouble, ready to protect these innocent lives that had somehow been entrusted to him. The old pickup truck rumbled down back roads and state highways, carrying its precious cargo deeper into Georgia's heart. Brick kept them off the main interstates, knowing that's where the first dragnet would be cast. The twins sat beside him, their small faces pressed against the windows, watching the world scroll past in an endless ribbon of pine trees and small towns. "Look at all the pretty flowers," Ariel exclaimed, pointing at a patch of wild daisies growing along the roadside. Her enthusiasm for every little thing they passed made something shift inside Brick's chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in decades. They stopped at a drive-thru for lunch, and Brick watched in the rearview mirror as the kids devoured their chicken nuggets like they were five-star cuisine. Amari carefully divided his fries with his sister, making sure they each had exactly the same amount. The simple gesture of sharing reminded Brick of his own brother, and he had to look away. "Mr. Angel?" Ariel's voice piped up from the back seat. "Can we sing our church songs? Mama always lets us sing in the car." Brick's first instinct was to say no. He hadn't stepped foot in a church since his confirmation at age 13. But when he glanced back and saw their hopeful faces, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. "Sure, kid, go ahead." They started with "Jesus Loves Me," their sweet voices filling the cab with innocent joy. Brick didn't know the words, but he found himself tapping his fingers on the steering wheel to their rhythm. Then came "This Little Light of Mine" and "Amazing Grace." The twins knew all the verses by heart. As the afternoon wore on, the singing continued. Brick was surprised to find himself remembering fragments of hymns from his childhood, words his mother had sung while doing laundry or cooking dinner, before everything went wrong. The memories weren't all painful anymore. They stopped at a small motel when darkness fell. It wasn't much, peeling paint and buzzing neon, but it was clean enough, and, more importantly, the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions. Brick got them settled in a room with 2 beds, making sure the windows and doors were secure before letting the kids get ready for bed. "Time for prayers," Ariel announced, kneeling beside her bed. Before Brick could step away, she grabbed his large, calloused hand in her tiny one. "You pray with us, Mr. Angel." Brick froze, but Ariel's grip was surprisingly strong. She bowed her head and began, "Dear Jesus, thank you for Mr. Angel and his truck and the chicken nuggets. Please help Mama find us soon, and please fix Mr. Angel's sad heart. He tries to hide it, but we can see it's hurting." Amen. The simple prayer knocked the wind out of him. He stood there, his hand still in Ariel's, unable to speak. How had this child seen straight through his carefully constructed walls? The next morning, they hit the road early. Brick needed to keep them moving, stay ahead of whatever was coming. They stopped at a gas station just past the Florida state line, a small, family-owned place with faded signs and rusty pumps. While Brick was filling up the truck, the twins needed to use the bathroom. He escorted them inside, every nerve on high alert. The teenage clerk behind the counter looked bored, scrolling through his phone, until he saw the kids. Brick noticed the moment of recognition in the boy's eyes. The clerk's hand moved toward the phone on the counter, and Brick's heart rate spiked. "Wait," Brick said quietly, approaching the counter while the twins were in the bathroom. He pulled out Tasha's photograph, the edges worn from handling. "Their mama. She's in trouble, running from someone dangerous. She sent them to me for protection." The clerk, his name tag read Danny, studied the photo, then looked at Brick's face. "There's an Amber Alert out for them," he said, but his hand moved away from the phone. "I know," Brick replied. But sometimes the law can't help. Sometimes it makes things worse. He met Danny's eyes. They're safe with me. I swear on my life. Danny was quiet for a long moment, looking between the photo and Brick's face. Finally, he nodded. My sister, he said softly. She was in a situation like that once. Took her 3 tries to get out. Did she make it? Yeah, finally. Danny handed the photo back. There's a back road behind the station. Takes you to Route 98. Fewer cameras that way. Brick nodded his thanks. When the twins came out, Danny gave them each a lollipop and a warm smile. As they drove away, Brick saw him in the rearview mirror, deliberately turning away from the security cameras. That night, they found another motel, this one even more run down than the last. The twins were exhausted from the day's travel, falling asleep almost as soon as their heads hit the pillows. Brick watched them from his chair by the window, their small forms curled together like quotation marks. In the quiet darkness, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. These children trusted him completely, their faith as pure as their hearts. And somewhere out there, their mother was counting on him too, the same woman who had once seen something worth saving in him when he was at his lowest. Brick moved from his chair to kneel beside the bed. The position felt foreign. He hadn't knelt to pray since he was a boy. But watching these children sleep, hearing Ariel's words about his sad heart echo in his mind, something broke open inside him. If you're out there, Tasha, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, I'll get him home. I promise. He paused, the words feeling rusty but necessary. And God, if you're listening, help me keep them safe. 20 years of silence between him and heaven, broken by a whispered prayer in a cheap motel room. Brick stayed there for a long moment, listening to the twins' steady breathing, feeling something shift in his soul, like a key turning in a long, locked door. Outside, crickets sang their night songs, and a warm breeze rustled through the palm trees. Somewhere in the darkness, Tasha was fighting her own battles. But here, in this moment, her children slept peacefully under the watch of their unlikely guardian angel, whose faded wings were starting to feel less like a burden and more like a calling. The morning sun painted long shadows across the motel parking lot as Brick loaded their few belongings into the truck. The twins were already buckled in, sharing a packet of vending machine cookies for breakfast. He needed to find them something better to eat, and soon. His old flip phone contained numbers he hadn't called in years, contacts from his past life who might know something about Tasha's whereabouts. Each call felt like reopening an old wound, but he pressed on. Listen, Charlie. He spoke into the phone, keeping his voice low so the twins wouldn't hear. I know it's been a while, but I need information about a women's shelter in the area. He paused, listening. Yeah, that's right. The one near St. Augustine. The twins sang softly in the back seat as they drove, their sweet voices carrying hymns learned in Sunday school. Jesus loves me, this I know. The simple melody twisted something in Brick's chest. Their first stop was St. Michael's Church, a modest white building with peeling paint and a crooked cross on top. The pastor's ancient van sat in the parking lot, its engine making sounds that made Brick wince from 50 feet away. Inside the church's small pantry, Miss Lila Thompson greeted them with the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd known her forever. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her floral dress seemed to match her gentle demeanor perfectly. Well now, she said, bending down to the twins' level. Aren't you two just precious as can be? She straightened up, meeting Brick's eyes without a trace of judgment. And you must be their guardian angel. Brick shifted uncomfortably. Just trying to help, ma'am. Miss Lila's eyes twinkled. Sometimes that's all the angels do, you know, just help where they can. She led them through the pantry, filling bags with fresh bread, fruit, and canned goods. The twins stuck close to Brick, but their eyes widened at the sight of fresh apples and packets of cookies. "That van outside," Brick said, changing the subject. "Sounds like it's about ready to give up." Miss Lila sighed. "Pastor's been trying to keep it running. We use it for deliveries to homebound folks, but lately it's been more trouble than help." "I could take a look," Brick offered. "Used to run my own garage." The offer turned into a full day's work. While Brick buried himself in the van's engine, the twins helped Miss Lila sort donations and stack cans. Their laughter echoed through the pantry, mixing with the sound of tools clanking and Miss Lila's gentle humming. Even the rough-looking men who came for food boxes couldn't help smiling when Amari and Ariel offered to help carry their packages. The twins had a way of melting the hardest expressions, turning suspicious glances into warm grins. As the afternoon stretched on, Miss Lila brought Brick a glass of sweet tea while he worked. "You know," she said, watching him tighten a bolt, "sometimes God hides us so we can heal before he sends help." Brick paused, wrench in hand. "Ma'am?" "These children," she continued, "they found you for a reason. And maybe you found them for the same reason." She patted his arm. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, but he never works without purpose." Later that evening, after the van was running smoothly and the pantry was closed, Miss Lila insisted they stay for dinner. She fed them homemade meatloaf and mashed potatoes, watching with grandmother's satisfaction as the twins cleaned their plates. While the children helped Miss Lila wash dishes, Brick made more calls. Finally, one paid off. "Yeah, I remember her," said a tired voice on the other end. "Tasha Gaines. She volunteered at New Hope Women's Center for a few months. Real good with the scared ones, you know? Had a way of calming them down." Brick's heart raced. "When did she leave?" "About 3 months ago. Just disappeared one day. Left a note saying she had to protect her family." The voice paused. "She helped a lot of women while she was here." That night, as Brick tucked the twins into the small cot Miss Lila had set up in the church's back room, he could see the fear in their eyes. "Are you going to leave us too?" Ariel whispered, her small hand clutching his sleeve. Amari's eyes filled with tears. "Like Mama did?" Brick felt his throat tighten. He knelt beside their cot, his large hands gentle as they smoothed the worn blanket. "Listen to me, both of you. I ain't going nowhere. Not till I get you home. You understand?" They nodded, but their grip on his sleeve didn't loosen. "Your mama," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "She didn't leave because she wanted to. She left to protect you. And now I'm here to protect you too. Promise?" Amari's voice was small in the dim room. "Cross my heart," Brick replied, making the gesture they'd taught him earlier that day. The twins finally released his sleeve, settling back against their pillows. He stayed with them until their breathing evened out in sleep, their small faces peaceful in the soft light filtering through the church windows. From her chair in the corner, Miss Lila spoke softly. "You're doing good work, Mr. Malone. Those children trust you completely." "That's what scares me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Fear is natural," she replied, "but faith is stronger, and those children? They have enough faith for all of us." Brick looked at the sleeping twins, remembering their laughter in the pantry, their eager hands helping Miss Lila, their sweet voices singing hymns, in the car. They had brought light into every dark corner they encountered, even the shadowed places in his own heart. The clue about the Women's Refuge Center was small, but it was something. Tomorrow they would follow this thread, hoping it would lead them closer to Tasha. For now, though, they were safe in this sanctuary, protected by stone walls and Miss Lila's prayers, and Brick's promise to keep them close until they found their way home. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Brick's pickup truck rumbled through the outskirts of Atlanta. The twins sat quietly beside him, their small hands clasped together as they watched the city landscape roll by. The directions to the New Hope Women's Center led them deeper into an industrial area where abandoned warehouses stood like tired sentinels against the sky. "Are we going to find Mama today?" Amari asked, his voice hopeful. Brick tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "We're going to try, buddy." But as they turned the final corner, his heart sank. Where the refuge center should have been stood a blackened skeleton of a building. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze, and the acrid smell of burned wood still hung in the air. "What happened to it?" Ariel pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with concern. Brick parked the truck and studied the scene. "Stay here for a minute, okay? I need to look around." He stepped out into the heat, his boots crunching on broken glass and charred debris. The building's shell loomed before him, its windows blown out, walls streaked with soot. This wasn't just any fire. The pattern of destruction spoke of deliberate intent. As he circled the building's perimeter, a voice called out behind him. "Sir, this is a restricted area." Brick turned to find a woman in her mid-30s approaching, her badge identifying her as Dana Morales, Social Services. She had sharp, intelligent eyes and carried herself with quiet authority. "I'm looking for someone," Brick said, keeping his voice steady. "Tasha Gaines. She volunteered here." Dana's expression shifted subtly. She glanced at the truck where the twins waited, then back to Brick. "Follow me," she said after a long moment. "Not here." She led him to a small coffee shop across the street. Through the window, Brick could keep an eye on the truck and the twins, who were now reading one of their picture books. "The fire happened 6 weeks ago," Dana said, sliding into a booth. "Arson. Professional job." Brick's jaw tightened. "Was anyone—" "No casualties," she assured him. "But it wasn't random. This place helped women escape dangerous situations, sometimes from very powerful men." "Like Luther Gaines," Brick said quietly. Dana's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that name?" "The twins. They're his stepkids. They came to me for help. Their mama's missing." Understanding dawned in Dana's eyes. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Tasha Gaines testified against a drug distribution ring 3 months ago. Luther wasn't just her abusive husband. He was their enforcer, the kind of man who makes problems disappear." Brick felt ice in his veins. He knew the type all too well. Had been that type, once upon a time. "After her testimony, we put her in witness protection," Dana continued. "She didn't want to leave her kids, but Luther had visitation rights. She knew he'd use them to find her." "So she ran," Brick concluded. "Trying to protect them." Dana nodded. "And now you've got those kids in your truck." She studied him carefully. "Former Hell's Angel, right? I can see the tattoos. Why are you helping them?" "Their mama saved my life once," Brick said simply. "Didn't know who she was then, but I do now." "Mr. Malone," Dana's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to stop looking. Luther has connections everywhere. That fire? It was a message. Anyone who helps Tasha or those kids—" "I ain't afraid of messages," Brick interrupted. "And I ain't leaving these kids until they're safe with their mama." Dana was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she pulled out a small notepad and wrote something down. "I shouldn't tell you this," she said, sliding the paper across the table. "But there's a shelter in Savannah. The director there, she sometimes helps women who need to disappear completely." Brick pocketed the note. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Dana said, standing. "Just be careful." "And Mr. Malone?" Those kids? They're lucky they found you." The sun was setting by the time they checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town. The room was clean but worn, with 2 beds and faded flowered wallpaper. While the twins got ready for bed, Brick sat in the room's only chair, his mind heavy with what he'd learned. "Mr. Brick?" Ariel's small voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood in her pajamas, looking at him with those wise eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Can I ask you something?" "Course you can, sweetheart." "Were you ever bad?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Amari looked up from his bed, both children waiting for his answer. Brick took a deep breath, knowing he owed them the truth. "Yeah," he said finally. "I was. Did some terrible things, hurt people, was part of a gang that hurt even more people." His voice grew rough. "Spent time in prison for it." "But you're not bad now," Amari said with certainty. Brick's laugh was bitter. "Been trying to make things right. Don't know if I can ever do enough to—" "Then you already are," Ariel interrupted, wrapping her small arms around his neck in a fierce hug. The simple faith in her words, the unconditional acceptance in that embrace, broke something open inside him. Tears he'd held back for years burned his eyes as he hugged her back, feeling Amari join them a moment later. These children saw him not as he had been, the violent enforcer, the ex-con, the man with blood on his hands, but as he was trying to be. And for the first time since he'd left prison, since he'd sworn to change his life, Brick believed he might actually deserve a second chance. "You're our angel," Ariel whispered against his shoulder. "God sent you to help us find Mama." Brick held them tighter, these precious children who had brought light into his darkness. "We're gonna find her," he promised. "Whatever it takes." Later, after the twins had fallen asleep, Brick stood at the window, watching the neon motel sign flicker against the night sky. Dana's warning echoed in his mind, mixing with what he knew about men like Luther Gaines. The road ahead would be dangerous, but looking at the sleeping children, he knew he'd walk through fire to keep them safe. He touched the note in his pocket, the address in Savannah that might lead them to Tasha. Tomorrow they would head east, following this new thread of hope. But tonight, in this quiet room with the soft sound of children's breathing, Brick allowed himself to believe in redemption. The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly as Brick's pickup truck rolled into Lake Sinclair, a quiet town nestled against shimmering waters. Pine trees swayed in the afternoon breeze, their shadows dancing across weathered storefronts and simple homes. The twins dozed in the back seat, exhausted from 3 days of searching different towns along the coast. Dana's tip had led them here, to this peaceful lakeside community where time seemed to move slower. Brick's eyes scanned each building carefully as he drove, looking for the medical clinic mentioned in the social worker's note. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, hope and anxiety mixing in his chest. "Look, Mr. Brick." Amari pointed through the window at a small white building with green trim. A simple sign read, "Lake Sinclair Family Clinic." Brick parked across the street, studying the entrance. People walked in and out, mostly elderly folks and young mothers with children. His heart jumped when he saw a woman in blue scrubs step out to help an older man to his car. But it wasn't Tasha. "You two stay put," he told the twins. "I'm gonna check inside first, make sure it's safe." The clinic's reception area was cool and clean, smelling of antiseptic and fresh coffee. A young receptionist looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "Need to see about getting these old battle scars checked," Brick said, gesturing to his tattooed arms. "Heard you got a new nurse here, real good with wound care." The receptionist nodded. "That would be Sarah. She's with a patient now, but she should be free in about 15 minutes if you'd like to wait." Sarah. An alias, maybe. Brick sat in one of the plastic chairs, pretending to flip through a magazine while watching the hallway. His prison-trained instincts stayed alert, noting exits and scanning each person who entered. After 20 minutes, a door opened and Brick's breath caught in his throat. There she was, Tasha, wearing light blue scrubs, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked tired but determined, just like the night she'd saved his life years ago. She was speaking quietly to an elderly patient, her kind eyes focused entirely on the woman's concerns. When the patient left, Tasha turned toward the reception desk. Her gaze swept across the waiting room and froze when she saw Brick. The color drained from her face. "It's okay," he said softly, standing slowly. "The kids are safe. They're right outside." Tasha's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Without a word, she ran past him through the clinic doors. Brick followed, watching as she spotted the pickup truck and her children inside. "Mama!" The twins' voices carried across the street as they scrambled out of the truck. Tasha fell to her knees on the sidewalk, gathering them both in her arms. Their sobs and laughter mixed together as they clung to each other, swaying slightly. Brick stood back, his own vision blurring as he watched the reunion. This was why he'd been saved that night years ago. This moment, right here. "My babies," Tasha kept whispering, kissing their faces. "My precious babies." She looked up at Brick over their heads, her eyes full of gratitude and questions. "They found me," he explained simply. Said their mama told them to look for the angel with wings on his back. Fresh tears spilled down Tasha's cheeks. "I never thought. I told them that story so they'd know who to trust if anything happened. I remembered your tattoo from that night in the ER." The clinic receptionist had come outside, concerned by the commotion. Tasha quickly wiped her eyes. "Jenny, I need to take the rest of the day off. Family emergency." "Of course, Sarah. Is everything okay?" "Yes," Tasha smiled, hugging her children closer. "Everything's finally okay." They drove to a small diner on the edge of town, away from curious eyes. The twins wouldn't let go of their mother's hands, and she kept touching their faces like she couldn't believe they were real. Over plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Tasha told her story. "Luther was more than just abusive," she explained quietly, while the twins colored on their placemats. "He was running drugs through his motorcycle club, using his position as a youth counselor as cover. When I found out, I couldn't stay silent. Those kids he was supposed to be helping." Brick nodded. He'd seen it before in his old life, predators hiding behind respected positions. "After I testified, the FBI put me in witness protection, but Luther had friends everywhere. He used his visitation rights to track me, sent people to watch the kids at school." Her voice broke. "I knew he'd never stop, so I ran. Left everything behind to keep my babies safe." "You did right," Brick said firmly. "Man like that, he don't deserve to be near children." Tasha squeezed her children's hands. "I missed them so much, every single day. But I had to get established somewhere safe first, build a new identity. I was almost ready to try to get them back. When they found me instead," Brick finished. "God works in mysterious ways," Tasha smiled through her tears. "The night I helped you in the ER, something told me to remember your tattoo, that you'd be important somehow." Brick shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. "Look, you can't stay here now. Luther's got people looking. Let me help you get somewhere safe, all of you together." "Where would we go?" "I got a friend runs a church up in the mountains of Tennessee. Real remote. Good people who know how to keep secrets. They'd help you start fresh." Tasha considered this, looking at her children. "We'd have to leave tonight. I can't risk anyone seeing the kids here." "I'll drive you myself," Brick promised. Get you settled somewhere Luther can't find you." That evening, Tasha packed quickly, while Brick kept watch outside the small apartment she'd been renting. The twins helped their mother gather photos and precious mementos, chattering excitedly about all the adventures they'd had with Mr. Brick. Once they were loaded up, Tasha took one last look at the life she'd built here. "I'll call Jenny tomorrow. Let her know I had a family emergency and can't come back. She's kind. She'll understand." They drove until the twins fell asleep. Then Brick insisted Tasha and the children take a room at a small motel while he slept in his truck outside. He parked where he could see both the motel room door and the clinic across the street, just in case. The night was peaceful, crickets chirping in the warm air. Brick reclined his seat, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. The weight of his past sins felt lighter somehow. Maybe this was what redemption felt like, not erasing the bad things you'd done, but using that knowledge to protect others from the same darkness. He watched the stars through his windshield, thinking about the long road ahead. Tomorrow they'd head for the mountains, help Tasha and her children build a new life. He'd make sure they were safe. Then, a car turned onto the street, moving slowly past the clinic with its lights off. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Brick's shoulder ached from sleeping in the truck, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He watched the sun rise over the clinic's weathered sign, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. At 7 o'clock, Tasha emerged from the motel room with the twins, each carrying small backpacks stuffed with their belongings. Ariel skipped over to Brick's truck, her braids bouncing. "Morning, Mr. Angel," she called out cheerfully. "Mama says we're going on another adventure." Brick managed a small smile, but something felt off. The morning was too quiet, the streets too empty. 20 years of street instincts screamed danger. He scanned the area again, more carefully this time. That's when he saw it. A black SUV crawling past the clinic, windows tinted dark. His heart dropped. He recognized the make and model, favorite choice for Luther's crew. "Get inside!" he shouted, but it was too late. The first shots shattered the clinic's windows, sending glass raining down like deadly diamonds. Brick moved without thinking, throwing himself over the twins as bullets tore through the morning air. White-hot pain exploded in his left shoulder, but he didn't let go. "The back door!" Tasha screamed, already moving. "Through the clinic!" Brick pushed the twins toward their mother, turning to face the attackers as they poured from the SUV. He recognized some faces from his old life. Men who'd once called him brother, now here to destroy the only good thing he'd ever done. The first one reached him with a baseball bat. Brick caught it with his good arm, yanking it away and swinging hard. The attacker went down, but 2 more replaced him. Fists and boots found their mark as Brick fought to give Tasha and the kids time to escape. Through the clinic's broken windows, he could see them running. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. Something heavy cracked against the back of his head. Brick stumbled, his vision blurring. A boot to his ribs sent him sprawling beside his truck, the gravel rough against his face. "Get the kids!" someone shouted. "Luther wants leverage!" "No. God, please, no!" Brick tried to push himself up, but his body wouldn't respond. Blood trickled into his eyes from a gash on his forehead. Through the haze, he saw men running past him, heard screams from behind the clinic. "Mr. Angel!" Ariel's terrified voice cut through everything else. "Help us!" He forced his eyes open, watching helplessly as the men dragged the struggling twins back toward the SUV. Tasha fought like a wild animal, but one of them slammed her against the wall. She crumpled to the ground, motionless. "Please," Brick whispered, reaching out with his good arm. But darkness was already creeping in at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was Ariel's face in the SUV's window, her small hand pressed against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks as she screamed his name. Then the vehicle peeled away, leaving only the smell of burning rubber and gunpowder. As consciousness slipped away, Brick felt something cold on his face. Rain. Just like that first night, when two scared children knocked on his door and changed everything. The drops mixed with his blood, forming tiny red rivers on the pavement. "I'm sorry," he mumbled to no one, the darkness finally taking him. "I'm so sorry." The rain fell harder, washing away all sound except the distant echo of Ariel's scream, calling for her angel one last time. Pain came first, sharp, insistent pain that pulsed through Brick's entire body. The smell of incense and old wood filled his nostrils as consciousness slowly returned. His eyes fluttered open to find himself lying on a narrow cot, surrounded by wooden walls covered in crosses and faded biker patches. "Welcome back, brother," a deep voice rumbled from nearby. Brick turned his head, wincing at the movement. There sat Reverend Hawk Hawkins, massive and intimidating despite his clerical collar. The former Hells Angel's arms were covered in scripture verses tattooed over old gang ink, a testament to his own journey from darkness to light. "How?" Brick's voice came out as a croak. "Found you bleeding out by your truck," Hawk said, leaning forward in his chair. "The Lord guided me there just in time. This is my church, outside Macon." Memories flooded back. The gunshots, the twins screaming, Tasha crumpling to the ground. Brick tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "Easy now," Hawk cautioned, placing a huge hand on Brick's bandaged shoulder. "You took quite a beating. Doc patched you up good, but you need rest." "Can't rest," Brick muttered. "The kids. They took the kids." "I know. Word travels fast in our old circles." Hawk's face darkened. "Luther's crew has them holed up somewhere, but you ain't in any shape to— Don't matter what shape I'm in." Brick forced himself to sit up, ignoring the pain. "I made them a promise." Hawk studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You still got those wings on your back, brother. Faded maybe, but they're there. Question is, you gonna use them for revenge or redemption?" The question hit Brick hard. He looked around the small church, taking in the worn pews and simple altar. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows on the floor. "I don't know how to pray," Brick admitted quietly. "Not really." "Ain't about knowing how," Hawk said. "It's about meaning it." For the first time since prison, Brick felt tears well up in his eyes. He thought of Ariel's innocent face, her tiny hand holding his while she prayed for his sad heart. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking, "help me save them. I'll do anything. Just help me do this one good thing." Hawk squeezed his shoulder. "Now that's a real prayer, brother." He stood up, his massive frame blocking the light. "And I think I know some folks who might want to help answer it." Within an hour, the church's small parking lot filled with motorcycles. Brick recognized the riders, men he'd once led on very different missions. They gathered in the chapel, some shifting uncomfortably under the watchful eyes of saints in the stained glass. "These kids," Brick told them, leaning heavily against the altar. "They're innocent, pure. Everything we stopped being a long time ago, but maybe by saving them, we save something in ourselves too." The bikers exchanged looks. One of them, a grizzled veteran named Tank, spoke up first. "This one's for redemption," he said firmly. Others nodded in agreement. As the men planned their rescue, Hawk pulled Brick aside and pressed something into his hand, a simple silver cross on a chain. "Found this in the truck," the Reverend said. "One of the twins must have left it." Brick's fingers closed around the cross. That night, after the others left, he limped out to where his old Harley waited. The motorcycle had seen better days, just like its owner, but it still had life in it. One more ride. He carefully tied the cross to the handlebars, letting it catch the moonlight. Each movement sent pain through his injured shoulder, but he ignored it. Physical pain didn't matter anymore. "One last ride," he whispered, touching the cross gently. "Just one more." The night air carried the smell of rain. The same rain that had brought 2 scared children to his door what felt like a lifetime ago. But this time, instead of hiding from his past, he was riding straight into it. And this time, he wasn't riding alone. Behind him, Hawks Church stood silent, its cross reaching toward the stars. Somewhere out there, 2 children were waiting for their angel, and no matter what it cost him, he would not let them down again. The first rays of sunlight painted the Georgia sky in shades of pink and gold as 6 motorcycles thundered down the empty highway toward Atlanta. Brick led the pack, his damaged shoulder throbbing with each mile, but his determination burned hotter than the pain. Hawk rode beside him, their bikes moving in perfect sync like old times, except now they were chasing redemption instead of trouble. Through his old contacts, they'd traced Luther's crew to an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. The building loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the dawn sky. Brick's heart clenched when he spotted 2 guards at the main entrance, confirming their intel. "Remember," Hawk's deep voice crackled through their helmet radios, "we ain't here for vengeance, just the kids." Brick nodded, remembering Ariel's prayers. They killed their engines half a mile out, rolling their bikes silently behind cover. While the other bikers created a distraction at the front, Brick slipped around to the loading dock, his years of gang experience guiding each step. Inside, the warehouse echoed with footsteps and distant voices. Brick moved like a shadow through the maze of crates and machinery until he heard it. Soft crying that could only be the twins. His heart nearly stopped when he saw them tied to chairs, scared but unharmed. Before he could reach them, Luther stepped out of the shadows, gun raised. "Should have known you'd come," he sneered. The fight erupted like a storm. Brick charged, ignoring the bullet that grazed his arm. Outside, motorcycles roared as his crew engaged Luther's men. The warehouse filled with the sounds of combat and revving engines. Brick fought with a fury he'd never known. Not the old rage of his gang days, but something purer. Each punch felt like a prayer. When Luther tried to shoot again, Brick knocked the gun flying and slammed him against a wall. For one moment, as his fist drew back, Brick saw his old self reflected in Luther's hateful eyes. But then he heard Ariel's voice in his head. "God sent us to you." Pinning Luther with an iron grip, Brick leaned close and growled, "You ain't worth my soul." Police sirens wailed in the distance, Hawk's contacts coming through. Luther's face twisted with fear as red and blue lights flooded the warehouse. As officers swarmed in, Brick rushed to untie the twins. They leaped into his arms, sobbing, their tears soaking his shirt. "You came back," Amari whispered. "You saved us," Ariel added through her tears. Brick held them tight, his own eyes wet. "I promised, didn't I?" he said softly. "Angels keep their promises." The white hospital walls seemed less stark now, softened by the cheerful drawings the twins had taped up everywhere. Brick lay in his bed, his shoulder healing slowly but surely. The morning sun streamed through the window, warming the colorful get-well cards that crowded his bedside table. Every day at exactly 11 o'clock, tiny footsteps would echo down the hallway. Amari and Ariel would burst in, their braids bouncing, carrying Tupperware containers of Tasha's home cooking. Today they brought his favorite, fried chicken and cornbread. "Mama says you need to eat more," Ariel declared, setting up his lunch with careful attention. Tasha followed behind them, her kind eyes twinkling. "The doctor says you're healing well," she said, adjusting his pillow. "Though I suspect these two are better medicine than anything they're giving you." The change in town had been dramatic. Sheriff Kemp had testified about Brick's courage, telling everyone how he'd put his life on the line to save the twins. The same people who once crossed the street to avoid him now stopped by with flowers and cards. Even old Mrs. Peterson from the drugstore, who used to clutch her purse whenever he walked in, had brought him homemade cookies. But nothing prepared him for that Sunday. Still moving carefully, he sat in the back pew of Reverend Hawk's church. During testimony time, the twins suddenly jumped up and ran to the front. They stood together at the microphone, holding hands. "Everyone used to say Mr. Brick was from hell 'cause of his tattoos," Amari said clearly. "But they're wrong," Ariel continued. "He's our angel. God sent him to save us." The congregation wiped their eyes as the twins told their story. Brick tried to hide his own tears, but they fell anyway. When Pastor Hawk invited him forward to kneel at the altar, something deep inside him broke open. For the first time in his life, Brick walked to the front of a church and got down on his knees, the twins' small hands held tight in his. 6 months passed like pages turning in a well-loved book. The old garage had transformed into something beautiful. Angel's Wings Motorcycle Shop stood proudly on Main Street, its freshly painted sign gleaming in the Georgia sun. Where rust and shadows once ruled, hope now flourished. Inside, the smell of motor oil mixed with fresh coffee. 3 ex-cons and 2 veterans worked alongside Brick, their hands busy with wrenches and spare parts. Each had a story of redemption, finding purpose in fixing broken machines and broken lives. The back wall told their story best. A massive mural of angel wings stretched from floor to ceiling, but what made it special were the tiny handprints in bright colors. Amari and Oriel had spent an entire Saturday carefully pressing their palms into paint, creating feathers that seemed to flutter in the shop's light. Tasha worked just 2 blocks away at the clinic, her nursing skills helping others find healing. Every evening at 6 o'clock, they gathered around Brick's small kitchen table, a family built by grace rather than blood. Sundays became their special days. Brick's restored Harley gleamed with pride, its custom sidecar painted with tiny angel wings. The twins squealed with delight as they cruised down familiar roads, their church clothes fluttering in the breeze. As they passed Mary's Diner, where their journey had first gained direction, Sally the waitress stepped outside with her usual bright smile and enthusiastic wave. Brick lifted his hand in return, his heart full and free. "Let's go fly, little angels," he called out, twisting the throttle. The engine rumbled with joy as they rode toward the setting sun, 3 hearts beating as one, finally and completely free. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.